Good morning, Local Gov campers, and welcome to day 4 of Local Gov Camp 2020. Today, I'm very pleased to announce that we have the Local Digital Office from MHCLG taking over the morning sessions. We're going to have a keynote. We're going to have an update of where the Local Digital Office is up to. We're going to have some lightning talks from a number of the Local Digital funded projects, including a number of the COVID ones. And then we're going to have a workshop run by the good people at Local Digital Office, looking at how you can move your transformation journey onwards using the digital declaration. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mayan Lau, who's head of the Local Digital Collaboration Unit, and Mr. Paul Maltby, who's Chief Digital Officer at MHCLG. Over to you, Mayan. Over to you, Paul.
Can I just say what's happening with Nick's face?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's apparently I've got a face for radio. So seeing it's Local Gov superheroes, trying to get the superheroes, local digital superheroes. Today, I am Mr. Local Gov Digital, and I'm going to be very pleased in introducing the Local Digital Office takeover of this morning's sessions. And we're going to start with a keynote from Paul Maltby. Paul is Chief Digital Officer at MHCLG. And if I could invite you, Paul, to take the virtual stand. And I shall now turn off the video and look forward to seeing you all in a bit. So Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. I've got a feeling that I was meant to be handing over to Mayan for a timetable thing. Mayan, you tell me if that's not quite right for the creepy compare. Thank you.
That's fine.
Mayan, Nick. Sorry, Mayan.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. As Nick said, we've got a whole morning of activities today. Let me just get my screen right. So I'm the head of the Local Digital Collaboration Unit at MHCLG. So our takeover morning starts with an overview from us, then exciting lightning talks from our funded projects, followed by a workshop, as Nick hinted about, on what you need to become a decoration superhero. So I'm going to now pass over to Paul Maltby, Chief Digital Officer at MHCLG. Paul, over to you.
Thank you. Seamless, wasn't it? Thanks very much, everyone. So yeah, so I'm Chief Digital Officer at Ministry of Housing, Communities, Local Government, and that means I'm responsible for keeping the technology lights on in the department, for making sure that services we run are good quality digital services, mainly B2B things, really to local government, to housing providers rather than to the public per se. Although our energy performance certificates service went live last weekend, which is a big deal for us. But also making sure that we do policy fit for the internet age, really, and the big stewardship that we have over housing and local growth, and obviously local government too. So what I want to do is start on we're 3 years old really, nearly 3 years old as a directorate in the department, but not far off 3 years exactly. I was here as in Bristol at Local Gov Camp, and I've just been given this new job looking after a bunch of things in the department, including on local government's digital capability, local services side. And I came along, basically said, look, I've got this really interesting job. I've been to Local Gov Camp before, fan of Local Gov Camp and other on conferences, and said, ran a session on, what do you want out of this? What is there to be done? And I thought it'd be useful to think about in the context of what has happened over the last 3 years, perhaps give a bit of a reflection to you as the as part of the sort of foundational community on this stuff. So Mayan, I think if I can give you a little nod. So yeah, so let me give you sort of 5 reflections on where I think where we are, where we've been. So the starting one on this is when we started off with this mission and the team, it was really, I think it was 3 of us at the time. I think it was me, Linda O'Halloran, Egley, and I think that was about it at the time. And we weren't, you know, obviously we got connections and we've spoken to people, we're aware of good stuff going on. There's a question of like, how much appetite for change is there out there? How hard is this going to be? How many of us are there, right? And what I think is really interesting as a first reflection is, you know, frankly, there's enough of us to make really quite a profound change in this system. I think we're still, you know, the things that were important, if you can flick on to the next one, there was some stuff when we started off in the local digital declaration, we're like, let's have this, what's the future of local government services in a digital world? And we were like really clear we wanted to co-write this. It wasn't the government's thing, it was us as a community, it was our thing, to say, what do we think needs to change? And, you know, if I reflect, there's still a lot of this stuff needs to be done. The default from these, like, you know, one level, quite motherhood and apple pie set of declaration commitments is still quite a long way from how most of the core software that runs local government works. But when we started off on this journey, we realized that we've got to have this a very different way of doing things with local government. And if we go on to the next slide, Mayan, it's a question of how many people were there with us. And you know what was really quite amazing is we started off with, I think it was 40-odd co-signatories of this, which was more than I was expecting, perhaps a couple of dozen. But quite quickly, we've had an acceleration of people saying, actually, we want to be part of this. Now, I think what's interesting here is that it's not always, you know, this isn't always like, in fact, often, in fact, rarely, the leader of the council or the chief executive going, here's a thing, this is what we need to be part of. This was designed as a tool to essentially be there for you to be able to make these changes, for you to be able to have these, to back you in these arguments internally, to say, you know what, these are changes that we can make. This is the direction that we're going on. This is what good looks like. And you know what, that's pretty good cover. I'm not kind of, the more number doesn't mean things are better, because there's a question about the depth of this as well as the breadth of it. But I think my main reflection is there's enough of us to make a difference here. Okay, if we go on to the next. And as I said, this is the thing of, it's designed to have your back. It's not designed as a, you know, a official government paper that means that we stand up in Parliament and do things. This is a thing, and for you to be able to wave in front of your teams, in front of your managers, in front of your politicians, and say, look, see, we're not alone in this mission. There are others with us on this. This is what good looks like, and this has the bit of what I can provide from central government is essentially this is the backing from the state to say that these changes are the way in which things need to be done. Okay, the second part, and sorry, I just say that I think the thing about having, like, the declaration has your back. I mean, we can't have your back in that same way. We're not yours, you're not ours. We're just all part of this community. But I think this is very much what our collective endeavour. And the second point about, we are a movement here. There's a community of practice. There's a way of looking at the world which is actually incredibly powerful. I think so much of our systems feel like, you know, vertical power structures where the most important person in the room says what happens, then we all kind of go and follow. But the very point of conferences like Local Gov Camp, the reason why they're so powerful is that the horizontal power structures these days can be bigger than the vertical power structures, or at least an important and growing part of that. So what do I mean by this? So if I can go on to the next couple of slides, you know, we've got a role in this. We've got a role to try and prompt and connect this up, and many of you have been, I mean, we're doing sort of face-to-face roadshows at the minute, understandably, but more of this will come along, I'm sure, in times to come. That moment ago, I'm not alone. There are people that I can connect with, people struggling with the same things as I'm struggling. It's incredible. I find these conferences, like I said to Nick earlier, like a shot in the arm. They improve my enthusiasm for the next hard, tough bits that we work through in days and months to come. And similarly, Marion, if you could flick the next one. You know, some of these projects we've funded through the local digital fund, and I know we're talking more about that later. But you know, we've had a lot of convening of people working on the same things. The point around our team is called the Local Digital Collaboration Unit in the department. And that point about getting people to work together, to collaborate, to understand that yes, they're not just alone, but actually if we're going to build software for the new age, we can reuse, we can borrow, we can share, and it's actually really important that we do these things collectively rather than separately in our own bubbles, because on our own, none of us are big enough to make that change. But I think the important thing, if we can roll on the next, is that when I'm talking about the community, is like the last thing I mean is that the central government has to be the convener, and that it's all about us in the middle connecting up everybody else. We've got a role to play there for sure, but I think that it's most powerful when I see lots of other communities of practice in this space doing their thing. So whether that's with LocalDigital itself, and if you're not already on the Slack, you should be. I think it's a really interesting place for people to connect and share and learn from each other. Again, it's yours, it's not ours. It's really important. And there are folks like Soccer Team, LGA, and others that are that have been around for a long time, and also now leading in this new world. But lots of those networks, iNetwork, Lottie is a new thing in London, and other regional groups are doing their thing. That ability to connect and share, it's about us. It's not about us, if you see what I mean. Okay, so if we can go on. One of the first things we said in we used it as our sort of cheesy hashtag all over Twitter in those early days about hashtag fix the plumbing. We must have said this a million times on stages and on the internet in those early days, and it was one of my big reflections is look, that was right. It was really about fixing the plumbing here. Now I think how we meant it has changed and evolved over the time. One of my original, when we were talking about this, I think it was Theo from the GLA was sort of kicking around with these ideas in a room in Martian Street in our department before we sort of really started, and this sort of came up. And one of the things I really meant by this at the time was that we don't just mean like making your website better. We don't just mean like prettifying things. We mean the systems that underpin how we work. We've got to sort the basics out. Let's not go on about AI and blockchains and Alexas and all the rest without doing the hard work to get the basics in a decent place. And I also, having done a job around data, had a really sort of a deep understanding, if you like, or mission to try and get data as an important thing. Now, I think actually our learning on this has changed over the years. So I think, those first rounds of LocalDigital Fund, we were asking for application for councils who were up for it, who got an idea, who wanted to do some things. And there was quite a broad spread of ideas. If we come on to the next one. What I think we've learned in part from this is that actually when we talk about plumbing, it's like actually we've got to take sort of domain by domain by domain, and we've got to actually, there's £3 billion technology market in local government, something like that, depends on how you count it. But there's a lot of money spent, and actually there's not a lot of extra money to go around for extra things. A lot of this now is going to be about actually how do we repurpose the money that's available to do our software in local government, the services and processes in local government better and more efficient. Now, one of the nice things I think that's come out over the last, last few months, but it's really not that long ago, was planning white paper, controversial in its own ways. I'm sure there's all sorts of politics around this. But if we crack on to the next bit, one of the important things that you'll see in the planning reforms is a commitment to a much more digital and data-led planning system. Now, this has come, one of the strong things that you as a community have been telling our team, our department for some time, is that there's some frustration with how the systems work in the planning world. And obviously, as Ministry of Housing, that's something that is also a domain interest to our department. And some of the things that we funded through the LocalDigital Fund, I think are going to become and emerge as really, really structurally important things, which are shifting how we think about how the planning system works. And I think it's really exciting. So there's the back office planning system. I think the next slide is the reducing valid planning applications. If you haven't seen these things, go and have a look. There's some really interesting work underway there, and I think that these are the sort of the things that, depending on what happens in the future with money and all, of course, politics and all those other things, we're starting to get to how do we start to scale some of these things. My colleagues in our team that deal with the digital planning side, I think I've got this sort of merging view, coming back to the plumbing, about what's the role of central government to be able to think about a software market that is modular, that's interoperable, but where data and the technical standards are the really important things. And instead of just designing those from high without any knowledge of the software, the importance of being there shoulder to shoulder with you as you're implementing new systems to understand what are the critical things that in the end will be the standards that enforce this movement. We're not in the business of, I think, in the department of making fancy services for the planning world. I think we're much more about ensuring the plumbing enables a system to function. Loads more I could talk about that, but I'll try not to. And things like having just simple lists and indexes of things. Like, have you ever tried to find the local plan, either in your own area or a neighboring area? You know, we had, what, 20% or so with like unpersistent URLs just moving around just over a couple of months when we were doing some of this work. And, you know, there's an awful lot of improvement, a lot of value to be added quite quickly, I think. Okay, so that was that one. And I don't need to tell you this, but a lot have changed, hasn't it, in the last 6 months, and you'll only have your own story of that. And I know a lot's been shared on this already. I think if we crack on the next slide, Mayan, I think, you know, there's loads of things we could put. It's always risky for me doing these sort of jobs to kind of pick one out and say, look, here's a nice example. This one's from Camden. But you all working in local government, particularly in digital teams as suppliers, rolled up your sleeves when this stuff hit over Easter and just before, wasn't it? You know, we were super busy as a team doing things like the shielding service, making sure you got the data in a sensible way in software that we really sometimes we're writing over a weekend ready to ship for the next day. It really, I think, has changed the dynamic, certainly centrally, and I hope for you too, about people understanding that yes, you can work online, yes, the tech does work, yes, you can use videos and collaboration in meetings for meetings and for core work, but also look how important these services that we do, look how important it is to be able to ship product quickly and effectively. And I think in many ways we wouldn't of course wish any of this horrible situation in the world at all, but it has had this impact for many of us on the way in which we work, the culture and our position within our own organisations. And I know you're already doing this, but please do seize that moment, because obviously those the background to this ebbs and flows. And then towards the end, you know, I think this, I was trying to reflect on what do I think after 3 years, what's the big story, where are we? Now, I talked at the start of this around the importance of this change across our sector as a movement, as almost like a campaign of people working together, making those changes to software, to hardware, but also to the culture in their own organizations. And that collaboration, that connection that we have is something that we've really fostered collectively, you know, before we were on the scene, but also since that. But it really feels like now it's that point of going, okay, how do we scale? How do we really ship this software, reuse people's whole software components? How do we help those different suppliers in this market to thrive and develop and get to this next stage? Now, if we can do the next slide. So an awful lot, of course, for where I sit depends on spending review and all those sorts of things, which are what do they say, like above my pay grade, right? So we're sort of battle away in the way we normally do, and we remain hopeful that we'll get to a different level in the near future to be able to give support in here. But I think, like I said it earlier on about the community, is like there's some things that we will fund and we'll be keen to kind of prompt software into that more modular, more user-centered, more data-first way of working. But it's not about us in the centre, it's not about MHCLG, it's about councils, it's about you shipping services working in a different way. And there's just hundreds of examples I can give here, and again, always slightly nervous of giving ones on the screen in this way, because it's like picking people out as favourites, but we should celebrate some of this stuff. So I think, well, with Cambridgeshire and others working on the blue badge systems and the sort of things they do, not with our support, because it's the right thing to do, because it's a better way of delivering software, because it's better for users, because it's better for council officers. I think this thing about shipping software, relearning, stuff we do every day, but actually scaling that in a different sort of way feels to me like the really big challenge for the next few years, and I hope we can play a really good and strong part of that. And if I remember rightly, that might be my last slide. No, it wasn't. That's it. This is the reveal. So don't tell Nick. But also we're hiring, and interestingly, we're hiring in Birmingham. Now, of course, we're all sort of sitting at home or, you know, in and out of the office sparingly these days, but it's important for us that we do have this footprint around the country. We're out and about, perhaps more than most civil servants anyway. And I've appreciated going and seeing you and your teams, your bosses, and helping sort of just get that, making sure that this is seen as a very normal and mainstream endeavour that we're involved in. But please do have a look. We're going to there'll be a blog going up, if it's not already up, on our mhclgdigital.blog.gov.uk site. Or in fact, Moddy's put it in the chat. But if you're interested, please do apply and say hi. I think that is it. Fingers crossed. There we go. Thanks very much, everyone.
Over kind of Q&A, is wondering whether does anyone have any questions for Paul? Please use the chat functionality, or also happy for you to kind of unmute yourself and ask the question. No? Okay, well, there's still time at the end as well if anything comes to mind, so we're going to move on. So thank you, Paul. And as kind of Paul mentioned, it's 2 years since we launched the declaration in July 2018, and we asked a whole lot of people to share their stories about the declaration and how it actually helped them. And there was a great outpouring of fantastic examples from all over the country. For example, the declaration helped inform strategies in Staffordshire County Council, helped develop reusable code for council websites in Croydon, Brighton and Hove and Westminster, and hopefully more councils to come. And also, as Paul mentioned, spurred and inspired new collaborative groups like Lottie, and also helped Cambridge Council make better digital services during COVID. I want to share a short soundbite from Paul Fleming, Director of Digital Business Change at Blackburn and Darwen Borough Council. He talks about how the declaration helped him and the new unitary.
So my name's Paul Fleming. I'm the Director of Digital and Business Change in Blackburn with Darwen Council, which is a unitary authority in the northwest of England.
And you signed the Local Digital Declaration in February 2019. How has it helped you?
It's helped us in many ways, I think. So first of all, it was a real visible commitment for us signing the declaration. It was something that was really exciting for me. I've always been around collaboration, around learning, and I think it provided this brilliant framework for us. But first and foremost, it was a visible commitment for us. We got our exec member, our elected member, stood up in front of the press with me talking about that locally, and it was a sign to the public. It was a real sign to our organisation of a path of travel for us. And it really gave us a framework from there on in that I've been able to work with my teams and wider teams on to I suppose beyond that create a bit of a culture with the organisation. And I think a lot of that would have been achievable without a sort of national and local collaboration like the declaration, but it definitely helped me. It definitely legitimised a lot of the thinking that we were doing. And I suppose since then, what it's opened up, some of the learning and some of the collaboration has definitely been able to enabled us to go further than what we could have done, I think, without it.
So with COVID, we saw a lot of local authorities responding with speed, creativity, working across organization boundaries, and used your local knowledge to deliver vital services to your communities. There were so many great examples. Paul touched on a few already, but other ones, including Ada and Wording, created a volunteer and community response platform in 48 hours and allowed volunteers to kind of pick up tasks in the community and then give the council information back on how that task went. And it's not just digital systems. Local authorities created easy to understand checklists to make sure the community had the information that they needed, and also offered payment holidays like Camden Council to boot. During the initial crisis response, our team continued with our convening role, but actually focused in on COVID activities. We crowdsourced a public document with useful digital tools and approaches, and also started to carry out research to show how councils were responding and what were the barriers, which resulted in us publishing our findings and a checklist of tips for communicating COVID information to residents. We also ran weekly calls to share information about the shielding service, and also had councils share their approaches to common challenges. And we had a great number of participants, over 350 plus. As the country shifted from crisis response to recovery, we ran workshops to understand recovery issues with 3 major themes emerging: data and reporting, community and engagement, and developing new working practices. So we used these 3 themes to launch a special COVID round of the Local Digital Fund, and were blown away by the response. We had 125 participants from 94 councils, and we funded 11 projects. Some of our projects will be showcasing what they've done in the lightning talks shortly following. As part of the New Ways of Working theme, we launched an online bootcamp to help people thrive for working remotely. We had just over 1,000 people registered, and if you haven't done so already, we would love to hear back from you on how you found the course. We have more online training to come, so watch out for announcement in our newsletter and also on our Twitter handle. So next up are the lightning talks from a selection of our Local Digital Fund and COVID Challenge project teams. So we got lots to get through. So we're going to start with Paul Davidson at Tameside Council, and there will be times for lightning talks for after each of the talks. So please use the chat functionality, and then I'm going to pass over to each of the speakers for them to present. So to start us off, please welcome Paul Davidson from Tameside Council. Paul, over to you to present.
Hello, yes. Now, am I showing my slides myself, or have you got my slides? Oh, I can't hear you now.
I mute myself. If you can show your slides yourself, that'd be great, Paul.
Do myself. All right, I'll just do that. Let me just share my screen then. Oh, I can't do it. Can't do it while somebody else is doing it.
Let me just stop my sharing.
This is slick, isn't it? How long have I got? All right. Oh my goodness. Share the screen. Okay. Okay, so you'll have to just tell me if you're seeing my screen.
Yes, we are.
You are. It's coming. There you go. How about that? So yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm Paul Davidson. I'm not from Tameside Council. I'm from Sedgemoor District Council. But the project I'm going to talk about is led by Tameside Council, and that's because Tameside Council lead an initiative called I Stand UK, and I Stand UK is a coming together of some councils and some government departments who want to promote that data standards can improve local public services. So this project is an I Stand UK project with the accountable organisation as Tameside Council. Right, and we've called the project Savvy. We're rather pleased with ourselves for that. Which means a scalable approach to vulnerability via interoperability. But we're trying to use that word savvy to also mean this is about gathering practical knowledge and therefore being able to make good judgments as a result of that knowledge that we collect. So lots of partners to our bid. You're seeing there the first of all, those are some of the leading players, councils that take involved in I Stand UK. We've been joined by Bristol City Council, because you'll see in a moment that they are a particular trailblazer for housing for homelessness. And Huntingdonshire District Council is important to us, because you'll see in a later slide that MHCLG have kind of paired us up with their project to work with. But we're very pleased that we've also got great involvement from a number of government departments. As we work through our workshops that we're running at the moment, we've got great involvement from those. They've each got part of the puzzle to play here, and we've also got some great involvement from community, or at least voluntary organisations like Crisis. So this started for us within the I Stand UK group, when the councils on our group were reflecting on the early experience of trying to use data to identify vulnerable people and households, and then compare that to the shielding list and reach out to those people and see if they needed help. So you'll see here, this is what Somerset was saying. So this is my area, and working with Somerset County Council, and I'm just picking out on some of their statements, and you'll see it's the problem is about data matching, it's about data quality. There's a problem with just finding that nobody uses the same identifier to mean the same thing. Lots of problems with important data actually just being in free text in certain places, some geographies don't line up, you know, and so on. And then you're seeing statements down the bottom there where they're saying, you know, they tried to match up shielded households to children in schools, and that was very hard. You know, that's the kind of thing that they were responding to us. I think the next one is just similar from North Yorkshire, and kind of we had this story from all of the councils that we talked about, but they're particularly picking up on how hard it was to find who had the data in the first place, and then the information governance implications on that, and stuff coming in different formats. So although we did find the vulnerable people and we did reach out, I think we all felt that it was hard and it kind of took too long. And when we come back round again, we want that to be a slicker experience. But the group were keen to say this isn't just about COVID-19, this isn't just about how we deal with a pandemic, because vulnerability is a general idea, and it's a bit of a core business for local authorities, and the data parts of vulnerability have been difficult for a long time. Is this an opportunity, whilst there is some leadership and some urgency around this kind of thing, to then come up with a way of working that works not just for COVID-19 but for other types of vulnerability? We particularly picked homelessness, but we could have picked you know, school exclusions or poverty, but we've picked homelessness, and therefore we're also working with, and you're seeing there statements from, well, Crisis and Bristol City Council, again reflecting on the data issues and the interworking issues of trying to cope with vulnerability in a multi-agency sense. So the problem boils down to councils have got to find vulnerable people and households, and having found them, it's about leading a multi-agency and community response to assessing those needs, and then to providing support and those interventions. So that needs to be a much more real-time experience than it actually was on the ground. You know, we need to know who's provided what support to who, who's been in contact with who, and so on. So in doing that, as you see, as I've showed, councils have found that you've got to find the data in the first place. Having found the data, you've got to have confidence in what the data is telling you about the vulnerability attributes in it. You've got to somehow try and match those data sets together. That's hard. And then do that action tracking in real time, but hopefully not on the basis of shared product, maybe on the basis of shared standards. So that's the problem that we set out with. And that was what our bid said, in fact. That's what we wanted to do. But MHCLG, as Paul was saying, or Mayan was saying, received over 100 bids to this, and some of them were also about vulnerability, not unsurprisingly. And in particular, MHCLG have paired us up with Huntingdonshire District Council. Now at Huntingdonshire, they have got a fairly mature approach to a risk approach to identifying vulnerability through a core set of life events. You can see on the screen there that they have an idea of which life events give rise to a score, and that score then leads to, when you combine it together, who's on the edge of crisis, and what type of interventions work well for what type of life events that's occurred. So they're very focused on life events. They're also very focused on their kind of vulnerability management app, which is then about leading that multi-agency collaboration. So their bid is about productionizing that and promoting their algorithms and their approach. But of course, what they don't have is the same problem that we were just saying, is that, well, where is this data? How reliable is it? What's the information governance? What's the data flows? So that's the pairing up that's been done here. We're going to focus on the data standards, the information governance, and the protocols, but we're particularly using Huntingdonshire as our customer for that. We're going to feed them in the data, and they're going to trial out our data standards in their products. So that's a good match, and we're running workshops with them now to be able to do that. So our project, first of all, we're about finding out what data standards are already out there, because if we don't need more standards, we just need to pick the right standards. There are plenty of standards out there that are in this space, and we are working our way through them and working with the custodians of them to try and fit them into the right space. If we do need to develop standards, it's going to be about communicating those life events, changes of circumstances, for and risk factors for vulnerable people and households. we're not just going to do the standards, so this is also about mapping out some of those core data flows that make that work. We're working with the DWP, we're working with NHS Digital, and of course we're working with councils themselves who've got privileged access to some of this data. We're going to work out the standards and protocols that enable us to share interventions and actions in real time, and we're also going to focus in on just some of the information governance, a framework for that that picks up on vulnerability, and good techniques and processes for information governance that enable us to discover, assess, and join data. So far, we're all working very hard. This is exciting stuff, but it's quite draining as well. We've appointed BODVOC. They're our technical partners. We did that via the digital marketplace. That was a good experience for us. We thought that worked well, and we're very pleased with our BODVOC partners as to how embedded they are in standards and how knowledgeable they are about the type of standards and data that we're talking about there. So we're feeling good about that. We've run some workshops for homelessness and life events, and we've got more workshops planned for next week, particularly around that COVID-19 experience and how we're engaging with NHS. We've already created some models for data standards as a scoping exercise, but really at the moment we're still in discovery phase, so we'll get to make some proposals about standards in the coming weeks. And I suppose throughout all that, we are also fortunately, we're being contacted by a number of councils along the way, and we're keen to engage with them, but actually we need to firm up our approach to comms at the moment, because we're keen to be working in the open and having a dialogue with lots of councils, but I think we need to find the best way of doing that at the moment, and we haven't done that yet. So there you go. I hope that was 5 minutes. You'll find that at the moment we're keeping our project updated and blogged on the Iceland UK website, and you can contact me, because everybody does, so please do. Paul Davison at sedgemoor.gov.uk.
Paul, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Paul? If not, I'm going to start off, Paul. How have you actually found the collaboration aspects, given that obviously the team came together during COVID? We also kind of merged you with a number of other councils. How's the experience of that been?
Well, of course, Iceland UK already existed, so we already had a good network of councils who were already on this subject, and Iceland UK has already got great relationships with some of the key departments. I've mentioned DWP and Cabinet and NHS, but we're also working with the Government Data GDS and the Data Standards Authority and the Cabinet Office for the work that they're doing around government data strategy and Digital Economy Act. So we're pretty well connected in the first place. However, of course, this has also been at the same time as there's been a whole digital shift to doing stuff as we're doing today. So in the past, when we'd have put on a workshop and it would have taken 6 weeks to organize it, and we'd have been ordering tea and buns, and actually we can stand up a workshop in 2 or 3 days. And I'm very pleased to say that people really have gone out of their way to say yes, which is also telling me that this is a subject people it's very dear to them, because they are making time for us. We're going at a rapid pace here. I've never known anything like it, but it feels like the right pace. But that pace only works when people do collaborate and engage, and I'm very pleased to say that they are. So far, so good with that. We're being a little bit overwhelmed by how people want to contribute and take part, but we're just going to have to cope with that.
That's fantastic. And have you found attitudes or culture-wise have shifted about data sharing? Has any of that felt different since COVID?
Oh yes, my goodness. I mean, just my own personal experience at Sedgemoor, as clearly when we needed to find people, I talked about leadership and urgency. I think that's how it felt. There was nobody saying, "Oh, I'm not sure this is really quite the right thing to do here, and our data isn't quite up to date yet, and are you sure you've got the right?" All of that dropped away immediately, and people were just going well out of their way to share data. I mean, I'm not saying recklessly, but some common sense prevailed. But if anything, now we can just come back and tidy up some of that and learn some of the good practice. So we're working with the Information Sharing Gateway, which is an initiative in the Northwest that really has got some good tooling and practitioners around information sharing. So we're hoovering all that up too. But the enthusiasm for data sharing is there, and it's there in the highest part of the organisation. So some of that reticence and hugging has fallen away entirely.
That's so great to hear, because you know, as I'm sure everyone knows, a lot of that is like one of the major barriers for getting work like this done. Thank you so much, Paul. It's great to hear from you. And by all means, if anyone wants to follow on like what the project is doing, we can pop a link to like where they can do that. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our next lightning talk, which is Will Callahan from Croydon Council. Will, can I pass over to you?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm not a Zoom user. I do apologise. Where are the buttons? And you should be able to see a presentation.
Yes, and it's gone full screen, so all
yeah,
good.
Fab. Okay, thank you. First off, thanks for the invite. We timed this at 10 minutes, so we'll go faster and we'll try and get it into 7 minutes. I'm Will Callahan. I'm a delivery manager at Croydon Council. I'm project lead for this project, and I'm joined by Finn Lewis, who's from one of our 2 suppliers, Agile Collective, and they're providing all the technical help to us for our project. You can follow along. Hi, Finn.
Just checking you can hear me. Yep.
Yep. And we're on Twitter at LocalGovDrupal, but I'll share some more project contacts at the end. The problem's really simple, and if you've been in the sort of local gov or central gov digital space for a while, you'll recognise this. How many publishing platforms or CMSs have you built? I reckon I've built about 7. And while the technology changes, the needs slightly change. My career, or a lot of my career, has largely been about rebuilding stuff, the stuff that I've done before. Made it better each time, but essentially rebuilding what I've already done. And the councils that we've spoken to, we're all doing this. And the biggest problem is that, what certainly I've found, is the budget runs out before you get to the really good stuff. So the change that we really want to see, none of us are really able to afford properly. I found it in Brighton, I found it in Croydon and other places I've been. Whereas if rather than starting from scratch, start from a better starting point where some of the basics are done, we can spend more money on delivering the kind of change that we talked about this morning. It's basically a Bill Murray moment. My whole life is, I am Bill Murray. You know, it's Groundhog Day. I arrived at Croydon, can you build us a CMS? Oh, here we go again. It's the same stuff that we're grappling with over and over. Not as attractive as him. Anyway, the problem statement is really clear. We had this in Discovery and we've stuck with it throughout. As councils, how do we co-develop, share, maintain open source code? It happens to be Drupal in our case, but this is applicable across all the projects that we're talking about. We started off very small as well. There was Alec in Brighton, Miggle, and me, a few of my colleagues, but we've grown a great deal. And it's thanks to the sort of perseverance of all the people who've sort of put time into this. We've now got a technical group that Finn leads and a product group that, you know, notionally I lead, but you know, these groups are interchangeable. We go to each other's meetings. We've got really good support from agencies like DXW, John Waterworth. We've got you know, good user research people. Sadly, Mira left the project last week, but you know, we wish her well. She's an amazing user researcher. Really good designers. You know, we're very talented. We're very fortunate to have all these talented people on board, and all these councils, and more getting in touch with us all the time. It's really growing as a movement, and that's heartening to see. You put this tweet up of mine earlier in the deck, and I added it about 5 minutes ago because this basically makes the point for us. We wouldn't have done this without Local Digital Declaration. It did have our back in the early days, and it continues to have our back now. You know, there's no way we wouldn't have been able to do this without it existing and the fund existing. And this was from a tweet a few weeks ago. It does feel like the future. I mean, Finn is delivery manager for the project. I think this particular session we had 3 agencies and 2 councils collaborating, freely giving their time. We're able to do so much more in the place that we're in. You know, we're not having to rely on 1 or 2 developers in councils. We've got many developers and so much more scope to do work. It's the future. What we've built. you can go and get this today and have a try if you like. So there's a home page, there's a sort of services architecture, so landing pages, regular pages, and something called service status, which I'll show you a picture of in a second. There are ways of building basic content like guides and step-by-step. If you've ever looked at the GovUK publisher, they're largely GovUK formats. We've got directories, or you might call them finders, if you're from central government. Promotional style pages called campaigns. We've just built events, an MVP, Stephen at Agile Collective built in under a week that we're all going to use. We've got a default theme that happens to be based on the Croydon design work, but you can build your own, and a lot of the councils are. This quarter up to Christmas, we're adding news and HTML publication, so we'll have an answer to the sort of PDF challenge. We'll have a format that you can use instead of PDFs, and we're going to push that pretty hard. Here are some of the pictures of what it looks like. The service updates shot on the left-hand side, we built that during COVID. That's Croydon's response to COVID. And it's now in the distribution. You know, we're inspired by TfL service status. How do we show people what's running right now? And we created that. Events is top right, and step-by-step is bottom right. It's all on GitHub. I think if you just do GitHub local gov Drupal, you'll get to it. Go and download it now. Tell us what you think. I'll hand over to Finn, who will tell us about some of the findings of our alpha. Finn?
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So yeah, alpha findings so far, we're just reaching the end of the alpha phase, which has been 10 sprints of solid development, and we're just wrapping that up with a survey that's still running, which I mentioned in a minute. So still some findings to bring to the table. But yeah, next slide.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. You're controlling. So yeah, our first finding is that the distribution, the Drupal distribution, as it's called, is now flexible enough to build on. This is a sort of case in point. Lambeth have just started building on it. Along with Croydon and BHCC sort of backporting their existing sites onto it. Bracknell started building, Westminster and RBKC have just starting to build on it now as well. Lambeth's site is planning to have something live in a few weeks and fully live by Christmas. So it's working already, which is great. It's still very much in an alpha phase, but it's working. This is, you know, in no small part due to the removal of dependencies and the componentization of the system. So people, you know, councils can install the system and just choose certain components of it if they don't want to have everything that comes out of the box. International people seem to be using it as well. This is a tweet from somebody in Spain who installed it and likes the look of it. So, you know, but this is, I guess, a nod to working in the open and the fact that it is open source. That means that eyes from all around the world can be on it, which is a great thing. If other people can make use of it or collaborate, then that's obviously a good thing. And, you know, along with the local digital declaration. Second finding is that we need to identify where our requirements align, but also where they diverge. We've got an open roadmap, so that's great for looking at new features coming in and where we can align with new requirements, but also making sure it's flexible enough that councils can diverge if they want to, that they're not forced into having everything exactly as it comes out of the distribution. So so this is something that we're continuing to find as more councils come on board. Next slide. Finding 3, we need ongoing technical and product management facilitation. This has been critical in the last 10 sprints of technical development, liaising between developers from different agencies and different councils, making sure that that process is facilitated well, is key. And what's happening at the moment is, as other councils come on, then actually the product management side of the facilitation is gaining pace, and having product group meetings to align, yeah, and work out where we're diverging and make sure we prioritize the right things. So facilitation of both of those product group and technical group is key to the success. Next slide. Yeah, it's important that the distribution works for different types of councils. Some councils have in-house developers and some councils don't. They often hire in developers, and potentially even councils who may want to use it with very little development additional. So we're very much keeping that in mind, and we're sort of reassured to see lots of other Drupal agencies coming on board who are not directly part of the project yet, but are giving time to the project and supporting the project. So so we think this is something that yeah, is key to again the success going forward into beta. We're optimistic about the future. We've got a survey out at the moment, which is in the top left there. If you go to bit.ly/localgovcms, you can fill out the survey, and we encourage you to do so if you're part of a local government organisation. So far, only one person has suggested that they wouldn't be interested in using LocalGov Drupal, and not all of these people are using Drupal at the moment. So you know, it's a strong starting point.
Sorry, Finn.
Finally, that's right. Finally, for local. No, you've gone. Finally. Sorry,
that was the one that you did, so I think that was you.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, that's me then. Yeah. Back over to you, Will.
That's me trying to move this so you can see the slide, see the URL.
Thank you.
Operator error. Thanks, Finn.
Thanks a lot, Will.
So we're thinking about a beta right now. So we're just getting to the end of an alpha, as Finn said. We definitely think there's a beta here. We're getting a lot of interest about it, but what's in it? So we think right now it's these things. So there's definitely something around product and technical facilitation. You know, we need to be able to keep collaborating, keep understanding each other, keep finding common needs. And then when we found those needs, how do we architect them? How do we build them? So there's something at the center. It's not controlling, it's helping. There's definitely something around answering requests from new councils who want to join. And I get a lot of email, and so does Finn, which is a good thing. But you know, how do we help those councils? So the documentation for GitHub is pretty good, but there isn't a shop window as yet that says, you know, here are the things which we really need. Also, you know, how are we doing Q&A? How are we doing kickoff sessions? Right now, we're doing them individually with councils, which isn't a great use of anyone's time. And, you know, we're having to rush through some of that work. So can we have them at intervals so councils can get on board, or at least look at what the distribution does? 1 and 2, points 1 and 2 obviously cost money, and you know we're going to apply to CLG again and see if we can cover them, you know, for a short period. But how do we cover them ultimately? Who pays for this ultimately? Or do we all do it for love? I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. So we need to really work through that. And what is this? Who is this? Who does this? We don't think it's individual councils. It's certainly not Croydon on its own, and it's not Brighton or the other councils that we mentioned. Is there a body at the centre, a foundation, a not-for-profit that runs this? Or is it part of another group that already exists? They run this as well as their other projects. We want to understand that better. And if anyone's got any thoughts about that, or any of this deck, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And that's stopped working again. But yes, thank you so much for your time. The survey link that Finn mentioned is right there, bit.ly/localgovcms. You can look us up on Twitter or drop me an email. We're on Slack, and also talk to our suppliers who've worked with us. You know, Agile Collective and DXW, who have done, continue to do amazing work. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Will and Finn. We think we just have time for one question for Will or Finn. Anyone? Maddie's also posted the survey link on the chat. So again, please fill it out. No, thank you, Will and Finn.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. So next we've got Richard Limbrick from Camden Council. Richard, can I pass over to you, please?
Yeah, you can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Just faff around and try and share my screen. Hold on a sec. Hopefully you can see that.
Yes, we can. All good.
Great. Okay. So I will just briefly introduce myself. I'm Richard Limbrick. I'm not actually a digital officer or anything. I don't work in the digital team, but I'm a planning officer. I manage a team in the planning service. But I'm kind of tech and trying to drag the planning system into the 21st century, or even the 20th century would be nice, is sort of something I'm passionate about. So I'm kind of ended up being involved in a lot of these projects. As part of the C19 challenge, we put in a bid, and it's around digital place-based engagement, and there are two strands to that, which I'll go into in a moment. You can read about this project. Best place, there's a Medium blog here. It's my Medium blog at the moment, but we'll get around to kind of working out a better common strategy for this as we keep going down it. We're at a fairly early stage in the project. So if you want to get involved or tweet us. You can find those details there. So we are working with, Camden are leading on it, but we're working with Middlesbrough on it. It's quite interesting having Middlesbrough as a partner, because they felt like they were sort of left behind in a lot of digital stuff. So we wanted a partner who we could kind of learn from their needs and what they need to do to try and bring them up to speed. Although obviously there's still a lot we can learn. We've also got people from Bucks involved in it, which hopefully they'll get more and more involved as the project goes on. And then obviously we're being supported by the collaboration unit and also the digital land team, who've been really brilliant in terms of just providing that support and linking us up with other relevant projects. So the two strands, the first one is really is a playbook, and this is really about trying to get people up to speed on the digital engagement. There's a lot of engagement within planning at various points, and I think with varying degrees of success in terms of impact. So what we're trying to do is write down effectively what we've adapted, and the users of that initially are going to be LPAs, local planning authorities, but also other placemaking services. So not necessarily just planning. We could be looking at things like regeneration teams, highways, parks, anything that's really place-based. And what we want to try and do is set the foundation of something, the idea being around a place-based profile. So using the information we get from people and from residents from various points of consultation, and actually creating something that's a little bit more kind of added value, where we can extract a lot more information and use it to inform a whole range of decisions or build services. And so the users for that will be much wider, including kind of private sector investment and so on. So in terms of what we've been doing, we've done a lot to respond to COVID. We had to get our planning committees online. We had to have those as full participation, and obviously we had to we were trying to develop a system for that while we were waiting for the government to change the legislation to allow it to happen. And the planning committee was the first public meeting that we had in Camden Council, so we were sort of like the test run. We developed that in collaboration with our digital team and with our committee services. But we've also done a lot of other kind of expanding on existing tools that we had been using, some digital platforms, but then we had to transfer kind of these face-to-face drop-in sessions and things like that. We had to find new digital platforms and tools to allow us to do that. So the first stage was like writing it down. We'd learned a lot from it, but we kind of need to keep making a note of that, and also share the learning, because putting when everyone was scrabbling to try and get their committees to run virtually, councils were all coming together and working on it, but again, it's like no one was really writing it down. So we're kind of writing down all those lessons so people can do it. And the point around this kind of place-based profile is that there's lots of points in the planning process. It's in theory this circular process where you come and kind of plan making, and then you provide guidance, area frameworks, start to allocate sites, then you go through kind of pre-application discussions with landowners, you go through application stages, and then you're looking at delivery and monitoring, and then that informs your plan making. And at each point there are different consultation platforms that are used for different consultation events. But we do what a lot of local government and central government's done for a long time. We're very, very good at collecting huge amounts of information, and then we sort of sit on it and we don't do much with it. So for us, it's about, okay, well, how can we use information we collect at different points to inform services and decisions across other areas of the planning process? And that then also allows us to get people to come in at a different point in the process, but maybe we can then signpost them to these other areas and make it kind of geographical or topic based. So if they see an application in their street, maybe we can actually then use that opportunity on a digital platform to signpost them towards an area framework that's also being consulted on. And that sort of leads us to the second strand, which is the digital planning notice. It's the one thing that didn't really get digitized in response to COVID. We're still sticking notices on lampposts. But planning notices have two problems. One is like physically what they look like, but they sort of disappear off into the background. People miss them, especially during COVID. We got lots of people saying we can't actually go out, so we're not seeing these planning notices. So we want to sort of make them just more attractive. These are ones that Atlanta did, which is just cool bit of graphic design, but it's quite important. It's the idea of standardization and something that's much clearer and more accessible to the community so they can understand what it is. But then what we want to do is kind of create a digital twin of that and have something which is geographical, so that maybe you have a look at something in your local area, or you go down the street, pings up on your phone, and you can see a consultation. And the point is that that could be richer as well, rather than just basic information on those notices, especially on the digital twin. We can make that much richer, but that is dependent on some other projects. Paul mentioned them earlier, Ripper and BOPS, which are in the planning area, and those are all very much around trying to change planning information from a series of PDFs to actually data. And if we can sort of sit on that that foundation that those projects are making, we can get much richer kind of consultation material for members of the public, so they can have a better understanding of what's going on and a better input in terms of shaping it. We're at an early stage. We're only on our second sprint at the moment, but we've already realised we need to rethink about how we collect that information. So like I just said, we're looking at that in terms of receipt of information into the planning system from applicants. But what we've realised is actually we can rethink this in terms of consultation material too. So rather than asking for comments and documents from people, and you know, we can actually think about how we want to structure that in a way that makes it easier to aggregate it and create this kind of place profile. And the other thing that's really come up is closing the gap on these different tools of consultation. There are lots and lots of different methods of consultation, and this is one of the exercises we did in the first sprint, which was around mapping these different tools that we use, digital platforms, and mapping their effectiveness against where they actually, where we say they are against where they are in the real world. And you see some are like they are just basic consultation material, like a press notice, it just goes in the press. But there are tools around our standard local plan consultation where actually I think it is basically just consultation, yet we're sort of selling it a little bit more as a collaborative thing. So we need to think about why that gap is so wide there, and how do we close it? How do we make it more of a collaborative consultation? And then we're just thinking about outputs from the project in terms of the playbook at the moment. I don't think we're going to be looking at a GUI at a front end. This is one of my doodles in one of the meetings. So I just kind of, rather than making it all fancy, I just scanned in my doodle. But it's the idea that we sort of put tags and classifications on material and put it in a structured way, and then we just make that accessible. There's obviously then questions around, okay, who builds a front end, or does anyone need to, you know, can we just leave that to others to build the different front ends for different purposes, different users? But then there's still that question around how, if we can find a structured way of showing this depending on different user needs and what they need to find out, is there then going to be a question around how do we continue to maintain this and feed into it, and who maintains that? So in terms of where we are next, we're starting to kind of lay the foundations of our user research a bit more, and we are also looking at getting our delivery partner, which we're going through the procurement process at the moment. Hopefully they're going to be appointed in the next few weeks, and then they will be working on the coding for the digital planning notice. And just a call out really for anyone who's would like to help us out with the project in this kind of initial phase of user research of the playbook. We'd really be interested to hear from people outside of our partners what kind of tools and platforms you're using, and what you've done in terms of digital engagement with people in place, and also how would you want to access that information. You know, what kind of how would you want to find out about these different tools and platforms that could help you in terms of your place shaping consultation. So if you do want to get in touch, there's my Twitter handle, and there's our project one. Get in touch, and I'll post up the link to the blogs as well, to the sprint notes, and you can find our show and tells on YouTube as well, which are all linked from our blog post. So get in touch if you want to help. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Richard. We've already got a question for you from Richard Moss. How are you keeping your elected members on site? I am in an affluent borough with a very vocal set of members that generally don't like change.
I think because Well, okay, so what I would say is that we're quite lucky in that some of our members are actually really passionate about this stuff, and they want to see change. And there is a culture that the organisation has where we want to try and transform that. Now, as you know, I mean, Paul already alluded to this as well. This idea, you know, the vertical structures within the organisation sometimes put a cap on that, and that's where things like the collaboration unit has been absolutely invaluable. They've sort of empowered us just to go and do stuff, and by having their backing, it really helps break down those vertical barriers internally, and that includes political as well. Because we're involved in other projects like RIPA and to a lesser extent BOPS, I've kind of had time to work on the members, and the ones who are interested in this area and who have influence over it are completely on board with it. So I've managed to kind of show them that, and because I think what we're doing is this comes back to this like basic point, right, of what we're trying to do in this local digital, because what sits behind all this really is a drive for greater transparency and putting users at the center of it, so that it's kind of democratizing our processes and the information that we hold. And I think if you explain that to members, they come along quite quickly, because they realize actually what you're doing is opening up the system, and you're basically empowering community. What we're trying to do is empower communities to engage with our services better, for us to make decisions which are better aligned with councillors. I mean, the place-based profile, that was like a really, you know, members love that idea, because they can just tap into it. They know, you know, members know, and we know as officers, just kind of anecdotally through working through your experience, you sort of know what different needs are in different areas, but it's all anecdotal. It's not really evidence-based, right? It's just sort of that they get a picture, but that they don't, you know, they're not talking to every kind of group within the community. And I think the idea for them that they can have much better insight and understanding of their community, that's pretty powerful, actually. So I think if you go back to the real basics of what's underpinning a lot of what this community is trying to do, the local government kind of community, then they tend to come along.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you again for your talk. So I'm going to shift to our next speaker now, who is Catherine Neal from Lambeth. Catherine, you there? You're on mute if you're speaking. Oh, there you are. You're still on mute.
My mic's not working.
There you go. Yay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had to unplug. I bought this headset specially because I have problems on Zoom calls and it's not working. There we go. That was a waste of money. Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic.
So shall we begin?
Go on.
Okay, let me just see presenting the screen. Now I'm worried. Share screen. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So hello, my name's Catherine Neal and I'm with Lambeth, and we're leading on the project Reducing Invalid Planning Applications, which Rich just referred to. It's RIPA for short. We're developing a tool to make online submissions of applications easier, more likely to provide a successful outcome in terms of actually submitting an application to the planning service, and that's known as valid in planning terms. We're collaborating with 6 other councils. You can see them all there: Buckinghamshire, Camden, Lewisham, Northumberland and Southwark. And together with Open Systems Lab and our developer and our user researcher, Ho Lam, there's the whole team you can see. We've been working really in a collaborative way, very hands-on, and in the spirit of that, there are going to be 4 of us presenting today. So we're going to also hear from Emily at Buckinghamshire, and also Toby and Chris from Lambeth will also be doing some of the slides. We're largely, like Rich has mentioned in that he's also part of this project, we're largely a non-digital team, but there are digital, more techie people within the team. But we're all passionate about the need for planning to be less opaque and brought into the 21st century for users and also councils. So what's the problem? Well, on average across the country, of all the householder applications councils receive, about 50% of those are invalid at the point of submission. So this means they're just not acceptable and they can't move on to be determined. This costs additional time and money to both applicants and councils, and is also really frustrating for both sides. And there you can see a graph which we pulled from a survey we did earlier this year, and you can see that across the combined stats, the majority are received invalid. So why are they invalid? Well, often they're simple reasons like a missing fee, which is crazy because fees are set and they're a standard thing set. So that should be really easy to get right. On the screen there, you can also see the ranked combined figures from a survey we ran earlier this year, which shows how frequently the same issues are experienced and repeated across the country. And there you can see that one of the two most common reasons for an invalid application are elevations. I mean, that's kind of fundamental to a planning application. And also the application form being filled in incorrectly, which is you know, well, why is the application form so difficult?
Right, so who are our users? Throughout the project, we put a lot of effort into identifying our users so that we can design our project better around their needs. There are four main user groups that we've identified. So applicants, firstly, consisting of citizens and businesses who want to submit a planning application. Then we've got agents acting on their behalf. Next, we've got planning authorities. So that's any council that processes planning applications. And finally, data maintainers and users, the people responsible for collecting, updating, or publishing planning data.
So we've really benefited from all of the 6 partners being really engaged and working collaboratively. We've worked in an agile way. We've run fortnightly workshops that all of the partners have been involved in. And having that expertise in the room for those workshops from all sorts of different disciplines, from planners, from policy, from finance, has really, really benefited the project. We've also done lots of user testing, which has been a revelation to all of us. Tested on iterations of the design with paper mock-ups and wireframes and so on, held show and tells, tweeted, and generally worked in the open.
Hello everyone, just double check, is my microphone working?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. So moving on to our outputs that we've sort of delivered over alpha and beta so far. So early on in the project, we started by comparing our partners' validation lists to identify all the documents we currently ask for validation, to understand when they are required and gain sort of general understanding of the validation process at present. Where possible, we've looked for opportunities to adopt common approaches to validation, as well as try to utilise GIS data and information provided by applicants to define the requirements. You can see this work by clicking the link at the bottom of this slide. I'm sure the slides will be circulated after this presentation. Moving on to the next set of outputs. So we undertook a huge exercise of reverse engineering all of the documents we ask for at validation, breaking them down into structured data and compiling them into a schema, sort of a bit like this. So this has ended up with effectively a list of all of the data that we currently ask for planning applications. The last output, the tool itself. So these data requirements have been structured into questions that applicants answer in order to submit their planning application. Applicants are only asked questions relevant to their proposal, and the tool prevents omissions from happening before the user can click submit. So we have a prototype at the moment. You can have a little play with it by clicking the link at the bottom of this slide to get a feel for the user experience of the tool.
Thanks, Emily. So we're also actively looking at different metrics to measure the benefits, from time saved to the cost of the application, and you can see there some of the things that we're capturing. But we're also looking at non-monetary gains, using, for example, customer surveys to measure customer satisfaction before, so as is now, and then also after, once we have our private beta, after the tool goes live into private beta. But we are also hoping to measure non-financial benefits to the council, such as enhanced experience for planners, and also better communication between the customer and the council.
We've learned a lot through alpha and into beta. We've learned that digital planning will be much easier if planning policy is written in a more transparent and rules-based way. But we've also learned there may be some unintended consequences coming from our project, but that there will be additional benefits to, for example, faster processing of planning applications, and we'll be working with BOPs to ensure that we realise these benefits. what we've learned in terms of design, some documents are less in scope than we thought than others, but others, such as drawings, are more in scope than we thought. The My Applications dashboard could also have huge benefits in future. For example, if it was extended to allow users to follow application progress and to communicate more effectively with officers. We've also learned from our user research. Council interpretations of GDPR caused us problems initially getting in touch with users in some councils. But those users that we did reach were really, really helpful, and the feedback they gave was extremely useful, even with our early prototypes. Asking the users about their expectations for the system gave us some really great insights, and we really recommend testing early and testing often.
So what's next? One thing that we're going to be doing is to continue holding joint workshops between us at the Ripper team and the team working on BOPS, the back office planning system, led by Southwark. So we're going to try and identify opportunities for further collaboration. We'll also be working more closely with Camden's inclusive digital place-based engagement project, which Rich just took us through. We're going to have a private beta for lawful development certificates up and running for December of this year, and one for householders good to go by March of 2021. So a lot more exciting work moving forwards. And yeah, watch this space.
Thanks, Chris. So well, finally, to wrap up, that's our project website there, ripper.digital. And you can find links to all of our past show and tells and the whole project log for alpha and for beta. We're blogging all the time on Medium, and we're tweeting at Digital Plan Tech. One of the things that we're really keen to hear from more are users across the country. So if you have residents or businesses that you can promote our project to, please, please, please ask them to either follow us on Twitter and get in touch, or email us there at digitalplanning@lambeth.gov.uk, because the more user information, and this is really for their benefit, well, as well as councils, obviously, but the more they can input and tell us what works and what doesn't work, and makes it easier, the more likely we're going to have a really good tool that actually genuinely does reduce invalid planning applications, and that's the whole point of the project. So thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Does anyone have any questions for Catherine and the team? Oh, here we go. Oh no, that Leah's question is about Drupal. We can post you some information, Leah. Catherine, what kind of the major barriers you're facing at the moment?
Well, I think one of the major barriers is actually getting hold of users. And, at the moment, the project, there are 6 partners, but it's only Lambeth really that we've been able to access the users. We're using the legitimate interest assessment approach at Lambeth, which allows us to contact our users of planning. But the other councils are their information governance teams are very reluctant to let us access those databases, even with the LIA. So we're tweeting independently, and that's having some results, but we just need people to help us, get the message out there, because we really do need user input. And I think that's a massive barrier. Chris, Emily, Toby, any other barriers that you can think of?
I certainly, so I'm a planning policy officer, so I'm sort of involved in local plan strategic planning. I think a barrier that we've certainly found throughout the validation process is a general sort of cultural barrier in planning, which has not always been the most digitally friendly. I think it's great that these digital projects are kind of helping to raise awareness and provide alternate ways to look at the planning system. And it's really helpful that the planning white paper has kind of indicated that, the general direction of travel. But there is obviously still that barrier where we've got to make this adjustment, particularly around things like local plans that are sometimes quite difficult for users to understand, and we need to try and find a way to let the tool, I suppose, communicate that while still opening the path for more digital local plans in the future. But that's why it's been really great to have officers and different stakeholders involved, so that we can make sure that those past and future needs are going to be met by this project. But it's been very positive that it does seem these projects are making people rethink how the planning system kind of works. So we hope that's a barrier that can be overcome, or at least mitigated.
Yeah, can I just jump in on that very quickly? I mean, actually, that's a really good point, Emily. And, even as the lead project, we are still struggling with, kind of getting our policy teams and the co to really take on board the writing policy in a user-friendly language, I suppose, for want of a better term, or layperson-friendly language.
Yes.
And also validation rules, you know, trying to make them more rules-based. It is quite difficult to get people on board on that.
Thank you. Have to kind of like move on. Lee Emery's got a team. Actually, Richard's tried answering it as well. So if you wouldn't mind answering on chat, that'd be helpful. Thank you again, Catherine and team. I'd like to introduce the next speaker. So it's Tom Buttrick from Southwark Council. Tom, over to you.
Hello, good. Sorry, is it morning still? Almost, yes, it is. So,
good morning.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Buttrick. I'm just going to share my screen. Make sure we get the right screen here. Can everyone see that?
It's thinking about it. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm here today to present to you an overview of the building a back office planning system, snappily entitled BOPS. Let me just check. As I said, my name's Tom. I am a team leader in the planning policy team in Southwark Council. I'm the new product owner for BOPS, building on the excellent work that my colleague Jack Ricketts has done. You may have seen Jack around these parts over the past couple of years. And so thank you to him for the great work he's done, and we'll be continuing that work. In terms of, I just wanted to just quickly also touch that I'm also working with Catherine and the team on the RIPA project as one of the key stakeholders. And I think that kind of consistency within Southwark by working on a number of digital projects is definitely assisting, I think, the ongoing development. In terms of the team, we're working Unboxed. There's Unboxed in all their glory. We've worked with them so far all the way through discovery, alpha, through this beta phase, and touch wood through the next phase of development once we hopefully can confirm the next stage of funding from MHCLG, hopefully over the next few days. We've been working collaboratively with other boroughs, and actually we've worked on a number of these that you can see in front here through the alpha and discovery stage, a lot of with regards to the user research and also the testing that we've done, the user testing. But we have to also recognise that I'm combining them to RIPA and BOPS have an important relationship in terms of submitting the information, the valid information for the planning application, and then bringing that information into our back office system. So I've included Bucks and Lambeth in there as well, because we recognise that alignment of the project is an important part of moving both forwards to be part of that system, of that digital planning system. And we look forward to that further alignment of the two projects. So a user-centered back office system for planners to determine applications. And I think what's important to point out here is that where we've got to in BOPS with the MVP from our most recent beta stage, is that this is such a key module within a digital planning service. It's the module which actually officers use to determine the planning application. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to grant consents, and then people wouldn't be able to build what they wanted to build. So it's really important that this module I think can see why it was developed first, why this project has come forward for development. At this stage, the module is focused on household and permitted development applications. And obviously we're moving forward now with RIPA to look at household and minor and other, and we look forward to further discussions around what other applications we can take forward. So where does BOPS sit? I've talked about this digital planning service, as we know. This is a very basic flowchart here, and there is BOPS sitting in the middle of an existing process. It's one of a number of tools that Southwark are working on. Like I say, the RIPA tool, we have the PlanX, find out if you need planning application, that we're working on with OSL, who are obviously working on with RIPA. We're working on a new planning website. We've got an affordable housing monitoring tool. So we have the number of digital tools that we're working on, and BOPS, as I've said, is an integral part of that. There will potentially be some interesting kind of parallel positions that we take with our existing legacy software suppliers, and we're keen to further explore that and how we transition. So who are our users for this back office system? I think, and we have to be, being frank, that our primary users are planning officers who, in Southwark, process up to around 200 250 certificate of lawfulness application per annum. Then it's our managers, the planning managers, who sign them off, sign off the decisions. But I think we have to almost take a step back and think about, well, it's our applicants, they're the people and the agents as well, who are ultimately using our service to achieve a consent. And ultimately, it's that service that we want to improve, we want to make quicker. The current statutory weeks, that can be a lot quicker. And ultimately, the quicker that they determine, the quicker that we as a planning authority determine the application, the sooner that the building can start. Building back better, I believe, is a frequently used term at the moment. And obviously, this digital service is an integral part of the white paper, and we really understand the position of this module and what that means to ensure that this works well and then develops through further functionality and stages of development. So yeah, planning officers, planning managers, very important people in the application process. But as we've touched on, and I know a number of you would have seen this already and understand, well, why a back office system? The RIPA project, looking at invalid planning applications, we talked about the number of invalid planning applications, the time it takes, the wasted resource around that. But there's obviously got to be some key drivers for developing this module, because obviously we have the existing software. But the existing software is unintuitive. It's hard. It's hard to find information. If anyone's had a look at the systems, it's complex. It's designed for multiple reasons. It's modular though, which is I guess sits within this new framework of digital planning system as well. It relies on manual workarounds. It locks in data. Getting APIs to talk to legacy software is a challenge. There is movement there, but it is a challenge. And actually, we realize that it's very hard to innovate with these tools, and hence obviously why BOPS has been funded and the development continues. Because as we know, and as Catherine and the RIPA team just mentioned, permitted development, which is part of the MVP, is rules-based. So taking the kind of a valid application, certificate of lawfulness application from the RIPA, transferring it down into BOPS, using the BOPS should completely speed up that process. So one of the things we're kind of sort of discussing at the moment is how quickly can we make decisions moving from that 8-week target. And the challenge we're setting us, if it's a valid planning application, can we make a decision in 24 hours? That's a big challenge, but it's something that we think we can do with the functionality of the BOPS system. So our beta MVP, just running through it, there's two key strands to it at the moment. It's for planning officers to view the planning application, process the planning application, and make the recommendation. The planning manager comes along, reviews the recommendation, and makes the final decision, and then the decision is then emailed. The beta is ready to go. It's ready to test. We're itching to go on the testing. And once we've got the alignment further with the RIPA project in terms of the API, we can start testing the drawdown of data. We're going to be testing also with some historic data as well. And we've got a dedicated officer who's going to be leading the testing once we're ready to go. But what does it look like? So here's the planning officer. It's their casework. It sets out all the. These are just a number of screen grabs, but it shows how a number of screenshots of how the different stages of the process, be it from their overall casework to actually making a recommendation and reviewing the data. For those planning officers who are used to a legacy software provider, the sort of the feel, the design, the user experience for the officer is very different, and it's a lot more manageable and pleasing on the eye, and it's a great testament to the work Unbox have done, is to really focus on that, and actually as much as the process as well and the architecture behind it, but just to ensure that it just feels right. And obviously it very much fits within the GDS standards there. In terms of the planning, yep.
Sorry to interrupt though, yeah, we're kind of out of time.
Okay, and then the manager, and there's testing. Sorry, we've learned lots of lessons, and apologies I've gone over. But I think the key message is we're itching to go with the beta testing of the MVP and the development of the next phase.
Thank you, Tom. And Tom, if you can post some links into like how other people can find out more about the project, I think that would be really helpful. And obviously your details there. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone who's kind of given us the lightning talks. It's been really interesting to hear from all of our funded projects. And again, we'll send out like links to the slides, so don't be worried if you haven't seen it. And obviously Nick's taking a recording of this. So thank you again for coming, everyone. It's been a great session. Lovely to hear from all of the lightning talks. We do have a workshop coming up next on like what do you need to be a decoration superhero. So if you haven't signed up, there's still time to do so, and Nick can kind of like post a link to that. Thank you again. And Nick, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayan. Yes, that is the end of this first part of the Local Digital Office takeover. There is a very comprehensive video of all of those presentations. I've taken a copy of the chat, which I can include alongside the video. So I'll look forward to seeing those of you that have registered for the becoming a local digital office decoration hero. But for now, thank you very much, Mayan. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, all of the contributors from the funded projects. Hopefully see you all later on at another session. And that's all for now. Take care. Bye now.